This video is brought to you by Devout Decals, makers of reusable Catholic art for your home altar, your bedroom, and your home classroom.
Whenever a bishop in the United States or elsewhere does something courageous, even in a small way that should be common sense for anybody in the know and the problems that we face in the church today, we tend to give them accolades, praise, even if it's for the most basic things. We had a story like this that I initially didn't think was worth commenting on in a video. It happened about last week or the week before, until the bishop backed down. And now we got to talk about this. You see, last week, Bishop Shawnee of Jefferson City received praise on X and elsewhere on social media for doing something very basic, but something few bishops have had the courage to do. You see, Bishop McKnight issued a ban on several hymns and composers of hymns for the Mass. This is for the Novus Ordo Mass. These are not hymns you would ever see in a traditional Mass. These were most of the insufferable hymns that we're used to hearing, as well as composers who, when you dig a little deeply into them, you find out these are really troubling people. These are men cut from the same cloth as Ted McCarrick or Maciel, not people whose work we should be using at the Mass. They should be avoided at all cost, made anathema. And the bishop tried to do that until he backed down. And that's the unfortunate story here. So let's first go to the initial banning of these hymn settings. So he published a document called Suggested Mass Settings and Prohibited Hymns for the Diocese of Jefferson City. And if you look on this, you'll see that the approved Mass settings are for English or Latin chant, a Mass of Francis Cabrini, which would use the Oregon Catholic Press, which is a very troubling publication that I'm surprised Archbishop Sample in Portland, Oregon, allows to be published. As well as there's a revised Mass of Creation that's allowed, and as well as a Spanish language and a bilingual language setting that he explicitly approves. But here are the prohibited hymns. And they're hymns deemed doctrinally problematic by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Doctrine. So these are hymns that are heretical. They contain errors theologically. And if you're singing these hymns, you tend to internalize the things that you tend to sing. So for instance, All Are Welcome by Marty Haugen, Ashes by Tom Conry, Bread of Life by Bernadette Farrell. I've sung all three of these myself in my ancient history back when I used to go to the ordinary form. The Celtic Alleluia by Christopher Walker and Fintan O'Carroll. The Covenant Hymn by Rory Cooney and Gary Daigle. For the Healing of the Nations, or God Has Chosen Me. The Hallelujah, We Sing Your Praise. Led by the Spirit by Bob Hurd. Many and Great by Ricky Monalo. The Table of Plenty by Dan Shute. 3 Days by M.D. Ridge and Casey McKinley. And I don't say why, in general, with these three, or with this list of hymns, why each one is specifically problematic. They just ban them outright. And that's good. They should be banned. And then here's where it gets interesting. All works by the following composers are prohibited: David Haas, Cesario Gabarin, and Ed Conlon. They might wonder, why were they banned? It's pretty straightforward. Those three men had charges leveled against them from credible sources that they are men cut from the same cloth as creepy Ted McCarrick. Don't need to go into more detail than that. It has always struck people as odd that these wicked men we were still honoring with their music at the Mass. Seems a bit mixed messaging there. Not to mention, kind of makes you wonder what kind of effect that was having on the spiritual well-being of people. And if that was just the story, that would be it. Unfortunately, that's not just the story. So we go to the pillar for this headline. Jefferson City Bishop walks back Mass hymn policy, opens synodal consultation. Synodality has claimed another victim in the church. This time, it has claimed justice and decency. And of course, theological orthodoxy. You have to have, your hymns need to be, theologically correct. That's part of what a bishop's job is to protect the flock under his care from heresy and error. But that's not what synodality does. He walked this back in the name of synodality. From the article, quote, the bishop announced November 5th that he would begin a synodal process of consultation and discernment regarding the sacred music used in the celebration of the liturgy, The announcement came after McKnight had initially published a decree on sacred music on October 28th, which received social media attention across the U.S. because it banned the use of some hymns in diocesan liturgies. This first decree, which was published following years of research by the Diocesan Liturgical Commission and with input from the Presbyterian Council, included lists of banned songs and composers, explained a soon-to-be-published article for the diocese newspaper, sent to the pillar for review by the diocesan communications director. The decision to prohibit specific songs and composers led to a spirited discussion, including on social media, as well as stories and opinions shared in some Catholic media outlets outside the diocese. Amid the media attention and discussion, the article said, quote, Bishop McKnight determined a synodal approach, one of listening and communal discernment, was necessary. On November 5th, McKnight issued a new decree, abrogating his original policy and promulgating a new one, which maintained a prohibition on the composers but stepped back from other elements of the first decree. The new document, entitled Promoting Active Participation in the Liturgy Through Sacred Music, also stressed the need for consultation with and input from lay Catholics in the diocese. McKnight explained that his original promulgation was intended to, quote, foster the active participation of the laity in the liturgy by providing common mass settings for singing by the whole assembly in the diocesan liturgies. But he said it is now clear that an authentically synodal process of greater consultation did not occur prior to its promulgation. The new policy, which takes effect immediately, is approved ad experimentum for 1 year. The Diocesan Liturgical Commission will conduct a year-long consultation of diocesan pastors, musical ministers, and the faithful, and will then suggest potential revisions to the policy before it's finalized. End quote. Now, the good news is those 3 wicked men who are composers that are banned are still banned, so at least there's that. But he ended up surrendering on this issue on the grounds of synodality. It's visible in the part of the document that calls for lay input in decision-making. Yes, even a bishop these days can't make calls unilaterally about what is dangerous theologically for his flock without his flock giving their input. Imagine an actual shepherd, a literal shepherd, having to get input from his actual literal sheep before taking his actual literal sheep out to pasture, to graze. That he has to actually get their input on which pasture they want to go to, the makeup of each individual pasture. You feeling something with more clover this week? Right? Can you imagine how ridiculous that would be? But that's here we are. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a bishop now, because of synodality, who can't even unilaterally make the most basic decisions a bishop is expected to make. What is dangerous for the spiritual well-being of those souls under his care? Welcome to this new synodal church. It is absurd, and that's what we saw in this story. The bishop had to step back. Now, what makes you wonder, what was the impetus for stepping back? After all, this list, putting out PDFs and making these announcements that these things are banned, that's not just something you do on a whim. A lot of work went into this. Did they get a call from the nuncio? Did this bishop get a call from an archbishop nearby who generally because if you don't know, most dioceses, if you have just a regular bishop and not an archbishop, while they run their diocese and most things, if there's some concern that the neighboring archbishop will have, he will usually poke his head in and evaluate things, and there's a formal governing relationship between the neighboring archbishop and a local bishop. And did Bishop McKnight get a call from the neighboring bishop? Did somebody from Rome call him? We don't know. That detail is not shared here. But it's a little weird because you don't ban these kinds of hymns unilaterally without a lot of work going into it and a decision-making process. And it was overridden by synodality. That's the first casualty of the synodal reforms in the church. A bishop trying to do the most basic aspects of his job and now being unable or unwilling to do it because the synodal church demands the input of the laity, even into things that the laity have no business in giving their input on, or perhaps especially on those things that the laity have no business giving their input on, like, for instance, what hymns are too heretical to be sung at Mass. Please pray for this bishop. Curious what you have to say about this. Let me know in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. If you ever thought about supporting the work of Return to Tradition, now is a great time to do it. Your continued support helps keep these daily messages coming and is greatly appreciated. Links to Patreon, Subscribe Star, and all the rest are in the drop-down box below, or you can hit that join button right below the view screen. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.